how closely these events lined up with the Planetary Health Annual Meeting and the One Health Day. So it really seemed like almost too much of a low-hanging fruit that we needed to do something to try and link that up because, as was highlighted by several speakers, there is room for improvements in terms of integration between and even connection and collaboration between One Health and Planetary Health, leave alone between these types of integrative health models and the modern medical or modern socio-political structure. So I'm really excited about today and want to give a special thank you to Val for connecting us to Gary, and to Gary for agreeing to this talk on such short notice, even in the midst of a really busy travel schedule. So I'll pass it to Nightingale and then we can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Thank you so much, Gary, for coming in, and also Val, and really good to see you. It's been a while since we saw each other. So I am Nightingale Wakigera, and I was born and raised in Kenya by the Rift Valley, and I'm a registered nurse, as well as a mother of two young children. And in a lot of ways, they're my drivers for a lot of the work that I'm doing. They're so much of my inspiration. And, I look at them, I think about them, and I remember the work that I must do for them and for other generations to come. So I think that's all I can share right now, but also to add two things that in a lot of ways, this gathering is a very small gathering, but we are Zooming, we're recording it on YouTube. And so we will share it with others who, because of not being able to make it for whatever reason, including especially the African community, some of them connectivity issues, we can share this talk at a later time. And I think these are the challenges that we have to think about and to figure out how to overcome gradually, that having some of these conversations addresses some of those issues, but also that now we have the privilege of recording and can share at a later time the wealth of wisdom that will be shared today. So thanks again. And after introductions, we can do just a very quick thankfulness and grounding exercise, and then we will move on. So I'll hand it on to.
Hi, my name is Masa. I'm a postdoc research fellow at School of Public Health at Harvard University. I recently started studying about the planetary health and One Health, so I'm very excited to hear your talk today. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Masa.
So I see that we also have Marie. I know Marie, you had said hello, but if you're okay, if you could please say hello and introduce yourself a little bit.
And welcome, Mona.
Yeah, hi, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. So my name is Marie-Jo. I'm a public health physician from Montreal, Canada. I work at a provincial Institute of Public Health in environmental health, especially on issues related with climate change. And I was previously working in an indigenous region, and that's where I guess learned everything about holistic health and holistic environmental health. So I'm very new to both the planetary health and the One Health communities, but I think I have a lot to learn, and what I'm looking for is really kind of bridging all these different frameworks and worldviews in order to give a better service to my communities. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Marie. I think I'll go ahead and invite Dr.
Mona, and then Val can introduce Gary after introducing himself.
Dr. Mona El-Sharbini. If you are able to come in, please welcome.
Hi, Mona.
We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Hi, Mona.
Hi.
We cannot hear you, and I can see that you're driving. So maybe we give you a little time, and then we can have you try again when you're able. Yes,
Great.
Mona?
I think maybe we hear you better now.
Yeah, try again, please. Still not good. Mona, it's still not good. So we're going to just let us skip for a little bit and we will try again.
But Mona is based in Egypt, works for University of Cairo as a professor of parasitology, and she's one of our executive team members for ACOPPHE. And I see Mongai
So
is trying to join from Kenya.
I think we're just going to go ahead and if we can invite Val to come and please
We'll have to
have
mute
Nathan, please welcome Val.
Nathan.
So
You have to
I
mute
shared
people.
in the beginning about
Uh-oh.
so I think we can invite Val to come in,
Okay,
and
thank you.
we'll do our best to manage the muting situation.
Well, thank you, Nathan. And sorry about some of the connectivity issues, but I'm just an old geezer who grew up in the state of Indiana, and Earth Day hit me between the eyes. We're still picking up some audio from Mona, I think. Mona, maybe if you can mute your microphone, that would help. Anyway, I'm a toxicologist. I was a small animal doctor. I became a veterinary toxicologist to try to do something. Did some aquatic animal health, studied frogs a lot, cyanobacterial toxins a lot. Suggested some things about ecosystem health to the veterinary profession in the 90s. Had an opportunity to work with Gary, but didn't pan out at Tufts for some complex reasons. But I've followed his career, and he has done what I would call multi-scale work, understands the need to work with people in real places and to identify on the ground problems and solve problems for multiple species, including people and wildlife, to get towards sustainability. He's been an absolute beacon for the rest of us. And I actually urged his alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, to invite him back last year. And I know he did a great job in inspiring that generation of veterinarians and veterinary students in the works. So Gary, I think you need to do it again. And I know you will. So thank you for kindly providing your presentation.
Well, Nathan, I can just introduce myself. But I have Mona. Maybe Mona has to sign in and sign out again. I think there might be two microphones on. My guess is that she has a car microphone and her phone microphone, and one may be muted, but the other might not.
That sounds like a really nice diagnosis. It was beyond my knowledge because the one that I see is muted, so I don't know. And maybe real quick, Gary, before you start and introduce yourself, we are just joined by a new friend. So I'll let Vanessa say hello too.
Hello, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to be able to be here, even for a little time. I'm Vanessa Góes. I'm from Brazil. Integrative health professional, a dancer, promoting planetary health as much as I can.
Fantastic.
Nice to meet you.
And I'll just
I should say bom dia. Nice
Bom
to.
dia.
So just really briefly, a little more about Vanessa. She's another member of our ACOPPHE executive team, and she gave the closing keynote for the Planetary Health annual meeting just yesterday. And
Wow.
she did it as a dance, and the key message is about the need to really blend even beyond the health framing with community, with artists, because of the importance of building and growing the movement, I think.
Yes, building the field, growing the movement.
Yes, so that was the theme of the annual meeting, and Vanessa really puts a beautiful, artistic, powerful spin to what that needs to look like moving forward. So we're honored to have her with us.
Thank you. Hi, Mona.
Well, how can anyone compete with that? That's fantastic. Well, if you allow, I'll just quickly self-introduce me, Gary. I'm now living in the last couple of years, I've been increasingly known as Raina Plowright's husband. My wife is actually much more famous in the planetary health space than I am, because she may have talked at the meeting at Harvard virtually. She has a sabbatical here at the University of Montpellier, who've given me space for our time here, where they have a pandemic prevention. The European Pandemic Prevention Prevode is based in Montpellier, which is why we're here, and we're trying to look at how do we have an ecological approaches to pandemic prevention, and we're trying to meet people who are in this space. My day job is that I have a nonprofit organization that I started 15 years ago, the Center for Large Landscape Conservation. It's all based on trying to figure out how to address conservation at scale. And I'll discuss some of that in the talk today. And then I serve as IUCN's chair for the Connectivity Conservation Specialist Group. And connectivity is not mobile phone coverage. It's about how do we deal with the fragmentation crisis that's happening on the planet. I've known Val. Val's been an inspiration for many years. Val, I need therapy for what happened at Tufts.
Show me, because
And we could talk about that later. But I left Tufts because I went to work for one of the founders of Microsoft way back when, and have straddled kind of how to use philanthropy to advance some of this work. So if I think we can, hopefully I have a slide deck, and we can have a discussion afterwards if that's all right with you about what this is. And let me just say that I don't have all the answers here. I just am in this realm of planetary health. I'm more on the planet side than the people side. So you're going to see a little bit bias on my end. And that's because I believe that the underlying conditions that nature provides supports humanity. And so if that's okay with you, I'll start the presentation, and hold on here. I'll share my screen. Can you give me screen sharing capability? Nope, not yet.
You're muted, Nathan.
Okay, it's now. Okay, let me see if I can do it. Okay, there we are. Oh, interesting. It's going to allow me to share my desktop, but not a press. Oh, here it is, PowerPoint. Okay. It just came up. All right, can you see the first slide?
Looks
Perfect.
good. Yeah.
All right, so basically, the theme of this talk is saving nature on a dynamic planet, which includes us. So there's a lot of conversation about planetary health, One Health. I saw the title of this presentation, and I have no stock in any of these definitions in the sense of which is the preferred way of looking at this. I guess I lean to saving the planet, and then whatever process is out there that gets us there. And I know there are a lot of folks who have created some kind of camps in this realm, and I don't subscribe to that. I just know that it's an all hands on deck moment with the planet, and we don't have time to debate, and we just got to get on and do things. When it comes to what's going on with the planet, this paper by Tony Barnowski at Berkeley and Stanford and his wife Liz Hadley, has stuck in my mind that we are approaching a state shift in the Earth's biosphere. There's always this assumption that people will do what they do and nature will survive. And I don't think that's true. I think what we are doing is affecting the ecology of the planet to the point where, nature, if it does survive, will survive in different kind of conditions than before human beings evolved on the planet. I think the biggest problem right now in the realm of saving the planet is that there's a unfortunate divide, fragmentation between two realms of thought. There are those who believe and focus on the atmosphere and those who focus on the biosphere. And most of the resources are going to the atmosphere at the cost of the biosphere. So in this case, that's why 90% of all the resources going to conservation are going on climate change issues, but only 10% are going into biodiversity. And I think it's a crazy argument that we have split these two efforts that were born within a week of each other in 1992 in Rio. We have seen unprecedented levels of fragmentation, even in the pandemic, in developed countries like Australia, Brazil. It's unbelievable. Thank Kevin that they have brought Lula back in Brazil. But the planet is suffering from unprecedented levels. And when E.O. Wilson talks about 50% for the planet, half Earth, more than 50% of the planet is fragmented. And Brazil is the poster child for fragmentation with the Southeast rainforest. For any Paulista or Carioca will know that only 14% of that forest remains. And we also know that if we lose 70% of the Amazon basin, there'll be a tipping point, an ecological tipping point, and it will shift from forest to savanna. The Amazon creates its own weather pattern, atmospheric rain, and if we lose too much of it, we'll change the climate of not only Brazil, but of the planet. Fragmentation is a global disease, and in fact, the disease that we've all been dealing with COVID is related to fragmentation. And Eddie Holmes at University of Sydney is the one who did the probably the world's best origin study that COVID came from horseshoe bats through some intermediary, maybe a wet market, but it is from a fragmentation of southeast rainforests in Asia. There are classic studies of fragmentation on, in public health. Certainly, the whole Panama Canal history with yellow fever, a disease that exists within a structured rainforest at the top of the canopy, with fragmentation is brought in closer proximity with humans, and then having this awful disease in tropical environments, and almost cost the world not having a Panama Canal. There's been a lot of research in the public health sphere on fragmentation and direct public health impacts. This is the work of Micah Hahn, who's at University of Alaska, and Jonathan Patz at Wisconsin. Just showing that more fragmentation leads to higher malaria rates. For every 1% of deforestation incidents, there's an increase of 11% of malaria. So there is just growing evidence that fragmentation is not just an insult to the biosphere, it's an insult into the public health realm. Of course, climate change exacerbates fragmentation. Species need room to roam. Environments need to be able to adapt and deal with the changing environmental conditions. And habitats as we know them now may not be the habitat conditions for the future. And fragmentation just supercharges the problems of climate change supercharges the problems of fragmentation. Let's put it into terms. I know, Marie-Jo, you work with First Nations. I work with the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, several First Nations in the United States. And the Blackfeet are on a 1.3 million acre reservation. Everything that defines the Blackfeet is moving out of the Blackfeet because of climate change. Their medicinal plants are moving outside the reservation. The first foods that they depend on, that their stories are formative in their culture, are being affected either by the species cannot adapt, or these species are again moving out of the reservation. So the people are essentially trapped by the reservation, but their ecology has moved beyond them. And this is just one kind of side effect of how fragmentation and climate change work together to have a direct impact on humanity. The tip of the sphere's fragmentation is linear infrastructure, roads at the top. So every road that you know, every asphalt road in the world is going to double in the next 25 years. And 2/3 of that, of those roads that are going to be built are new footprint. That means they're going to go to areas where people have no rights, many indigenous people, or where there is no people or less people, such as areas of high biodiversity. And a lot of this will be in the tropical realm. My wife and I, Raina Plowright, we've come up with this concept that, roads have a disturbance zone. Ecologists think of it as 18 kilometers on each side of a road. The dust, the noise, the ancillary impacts relating to road development reach out much farther than the infrastructure itself. And this creates a zone of stress and disturbance. We feel that contributes to spillover of disease by creating the conditions for animals to be stressed. And that shedding event that's caused by this stress enhances the probability for spillover to happen. Spillover is not just a contact issue between people and novel diseases. It's a factor also of animals or reservoirs or vectors, of intermediate hosts being stressed from human actions that they create the conditions for more diseases to spread. And with these flying foxes, we know that several of the coronaviruses that they shed have had human impact. We know that many of these flying foxes carry 3,000 viruses within them, and it's all related to their metabolism and flight. And that's another story we can talk on. The other thing about roads is that there's a direct mortality event. This is a low back of the envelope figure that 100 million large mammals are killed every year through wildlife vehicle collisions. We think this number is a low estimate. There's a transmissible cancer, 2 transmissible cancers for Tasmanian devils that the world's been worried about, but an equal amount of Tasmanian devils in the wild are killed in wildlife vehicle collisions, 400 to 500 a year. It's not just white-tailed deer in the east. This has seismic impact on species health, survival, and distribution. If there's a biodiversity crisis, I think this is an understudied impact on how this affects biodiversity across all taxa. I mean, we can go from pollinators on up. So that's why I focus, if fragmentation is a problem, I focus on connectivity conservation as a countermeasure to fragmentation. It bridges the climate and biodiversity agendas. Several years ago, I was asked to create the global policy definition for connectivity conservation, and that was adopted by the Convention of Migratory Species. And that ecological connectivity is the unimpeded movement of species in the flow of natural processes that sustain life on Earth. It is the practice of addressing the dynamic aspects of nature. We have national parks that protect nature in patches and patterns, but we don't have a tool that addresses the dynamic elements of nature. The national park has been the touchstone for conservation around the world. It is a 19th century solution to a problem. And I live outside of Yellowstone National Park, and a lot of people don't realize that Yellowstone Park is a box. And that's truly, it is literally a box. And when you address conservation as a box, you do kind of perverse things. This is the checkerboard lands in the Western United States that was related to the railway giveaway to help finance transcontinental rail movement and building in the United States. And this is public and private lands in 640 acre squares. And this is not how ecology works. And this kind of perverse kind of land management yields a lot of the problems that we're seeing around the world. So my thesis is that connectivity conservation has arisen because it's an evolution of thinking. In the 19th century, we had national parks because we were saving patterns. We were saving specific places. Odum and others in the 20th century tried to expand the boundary of that pattern to start to conserve the processes that protect nature, and that's where the ecosystem concept came in. And in the 21st century, it's process conservation. It's those, we're here not to just save a place here and there. We're trying to save the ecological functions that sustain the biosphere. So I use this image just to show that the world is breathing, it's living. This is the annual green up, the deciduous forests primarily of the Southeast with seasonal change, the phenology of life. And people, the way we look at nature is as a static photograph. In fact, a lot of the land use data that's used for decision and conservation is from the MODIS satellite from 2013. So that's 9-year-old data. It's only recent that we're getting new lines of data coming on that's real time. So while in the human health field, you know, we're using CAT scans and nuclear imaging to get more dynamic assessments of our patient, we're doing a poor job with that kind of approach with the planet. The take-home message from all this is that conservation doesn't happen just in protected areas, and a lot of the protected areas weren't set up to save the functions of nature. Conservation happens because it happens on all lands and waters in the area that ecologists call the matrix. And connectivity conservation is that tool to address those dynamic functions that are needed for nature to survive, and that means for us to survive. And I've listed many of these attributes in the left-hand part of the slide. It's more than just wildlife corridors. It's about stream flows. It's about connectedness. It's about nutrient cycling. I think people simplify a concept that's much more broad than it is. But the practice is actually rather simple. The more connected you are, the better it is, the more ecological function you have. And I often, use the metaphor that if parks and protected areas are the organs of nature, the heart and lungs, we've done a really crappy job of saving the circulatory system. And that's what connectivity conservation is all about. Just to check in, is everyone hearing me? Is this okay? All right, so simply, my job is that I don't want any connectivity, so I work a lot to prevent fragmentation. So I use various methods to try to protect connectivity in landscapes or maintain intact landscapes. But where there is fragmentation, I work with folks to either do restoration or mitigation. And in the end, because the world is so fragmented, except for certain parts of the world, I promote ecological corridors with conservationists around the world to essentially create ecological networks. That's the way, my ideal world would look if we try to heal it, is to create some connections to reconnect the fragmented bits. And it's not just connecting parks to parks. I think that's the old conservation biology model. It's protecting areas of high biodiversity value, of high ecological value to other areas of ecological value. And they can be parks. The nodes can be parks. They could be indigenous areas. They could be private lands. They can be restored areas. And there are various ways of creating these ecological corridors or linkages in a landscape to create an ecological network. Now, here's an example in India, why this is important to do. Half the world's wild tigers exist in central India. These small green patches are the protected areas, and tigers need to move between those protected areas to survive and to thrive. India has a very good cultural tolerance to wildlife. I think it's the #1 country in the world with regards to coexistence. But if we didn't have connectivity as a tool, India is building roads left and right and new rail. And the assumption is that conservation is just going to happen in those green spots. We have to let decision makers know that those connectivity areas are vital for landscape health and the health of that area, and health of tigers in particular. And if we didn't bring this up, those areas would be seen as sacrifice areas for land use development. So the world is essentially a combination of highways and wildways. That's the way this kind of world is going to happen in a fragmented system. And while the science for ecological connectivity has been around for about 70 years, it began with MacArthur and Wilson with island biogeography, and then metapopulation work. It's expanded into practice since the millennium, 2002. And the takeoff has been the same for every country around the world, with the US leading the way. And a lot of it has been dealt with the fact that there's been enabling policy that has taken the science and put it into practice. So the World Commission on Protected Areas came to me about 6 years ago and said, connectivity is rising so quickly, we need a specialist group to support this community. So it began with 600 individuals, and now we're over almost 1,300 scientists and practitioners in 135 nations around the world who see this as who want to combat this issue. And we're trying to support this growing community of practice. We wrote the first guidelines, international guidelines. It was 4 years of my life, and I used to have hair before this. And had many consultations around the world. I used this slide for Australia recently, so I had to put the Australians in the slide, but we had one in Kenya and South America. So it wasn't just, it was a diverse group of people who were involved in this. And Brazil, we had input in Brazil as well. So we had to set a standard. If this is a new practice, you have to set some kind of standard where you can measure your success so you can improve on that practice. we had to talk about different aspects of connectivity, that we have climate gradients involved. Just because things are connected structurally, it may not be functional. Now think of elephant populations that still maintain the memory of old migration routes, but we've changed the landscape. They're still going to go along the old migration routes, even though the structure of the ecosystem may change. So this is, just we had to educate the different aspects of connectivity. And that connectivity is not just a terrestrial phenomenon. Actually, the marine phenomenon is much broader with the 3D environment, the water column. The law of the ocean, which is there on the right, is negotiating connectivity between different aspects of, or different management zones of the high seas. Nowhere is connectivity more important than in aquatic systems. And this is the global freshwater connectivity work that was done out of McGill University. North America is really a poor example of disconnectivity in aquatic systems. I only point this out because it has a classic public health case study with the dam in Senegal. I think it's called the Diama Dam, which has blocked the Senegal River at its mouth. And it took out the top predator for the schistosomiasis snail. So with the snail being on one side of the river, of the dam, and the predator being on the other, and without a predator and a functional trophic system, the snail has increased disproportionately and affected populations of the Senegal River basin in immense ways. So if we took out the dam and created more connectivity, we would have this predator, which is a super predator, on the snail that perpetuates schistosomiasis. Connectivity has risen in the past couple of years in every multilateral environmental agreement. So this is how quickly it's coming on. The UN had a unanimous resolution, Nature Knows No Borders, 2 years ago. The Convention on Biological Diversity has this now in several targets, and conventional migratory species made it a pillar of its work. And I'll get into what the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration is doing. So in global policy, CMS in Montreal is going to have connectivity in several of its new targets. But nations are not waiting for a UN resolution. Many nations are going ahead, and in Africa, Tanzania is leading the way with a connectivity policy. My organization helped the Tanzanian government come up with its official connectivity plan. The Kenyans do not want to they compete with the Tanzanians, and they have their own plan. That's incredible as well. As no Kenyan's going to be upstaged by a Tanzanian. Bhutan has used connectivity to save 50% of its nation, so that's why they're so happy. And Costa Rica and Canada are also leading the way. In fact, Canada is the least fragmented nation on the planet, I would argue, and they put a $2.3 billion investment into looking at how to stop fragmentation and promote connectivity conservation, because they see how it undermines what it is to be a Canadian if their wilderness or if their wild areas are disconnected. I mean, it all relies on First Nation involvement in Canada, as Marie-Jo will tell you. It's also, I believe, changing the way conservation organizations have to work. Connectivity is a socio-ecological process. You have to work across jurisdictions. You have to work across cultures and geographies. Institutions have to collaborate. Nonprofits, and especially in India, which is a very starved nonprofit sector, has seen something called the Coalition for Wildlife Corridors come about. These groups really, they don't like each other, yet they've come together to deal with this problem because it's such a massive problem, and they don't have the resources to deal with. The collaboration is key. We also have to, this has also created some kind of conversation in the civil engineering world. If roads and rail are the big, and linear infrastructure are a big fragmenting force, then we have to have green infrastructure involved and how roads are designed within landscapes. And a lot of people have focused on these wildlife overcrossings. They have been expensive. They've taken months to build, but with new modular designs, you put one in a weekend. And you can also move it if the habitat and species change based on climate change. So you're not stuck with this stranded asset for 75 years. You can actually move it based on the ecology of the region. As I said before, this you can take this to Africa. The Belt and Road Initiative, which is funding much of this in Asia, we had to do an assessment for USAID across 28 countries. And that's how we found out how 2/3 of all the new infrastructure is going to be new footprint. That calculus is the same for East and Central Africa, especially with the energy boom that's going on in Eastern Africa. As anyone who's living in Kenya, you'll know what's going on in Uganda with regards to the pipeline. The United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification has something called a Global Land Outlook, and they've asked us to write the connectivity guidance for restoration. And what that is that while the conservation biology world looks at connectivity as a green area between protected areas, how do we scale up restoration efforts? How do you just take restoration from nodes to networks? And we call that connect to restore. And the Great Green Wall of Africa has many problems, but basically it shows that restoration has to go to scale to have an ecological impact, and we can use connectivity approaches to do that. Africa has a fence problem. Australia and Africa have these continental fences. I call it, you have to defense. There are trade-offs with this. Obviously, the veterinary community is renegotiating its relationship between wildlife and livestock diseases. But these fences, these extraordinary fences are disrupting the ecology of so many, just like the border wall or is between Mexico and the United States. If you heard my wife at the One Health thing, she'll talk about how Australia, which has some of the highest rates of land clearing in the world, has led to this Hendra virus outbreak in suburban and urban areas of Australia. And that's because the flying fox has no habitat for it to congregate and feed. And she's worked with an ecologist, and if you can plant 4 certain species of wintering gums, the flying foxes will leave the cities and repopulate the wild areas, and so there will be distance between people and the animal, and you can remigrate or rewild the migration. And she feels this is an ecological countermeasure for dealing with the spillover events caused by Hendra virus, which is similar to Nipah, and it's a biosecurity 4 virus. So it's definitely a high case fatality. If Ebola is the disease of healthcare workers, Hendra is the disease of veterinary workers, because when they do necropsies on horses, which is the intermediate host, that's when they fall susceptible to the virus. Connectivity also has another element here that we're all dealing with. When we look at climate change, the conditions or the operating space for how nature is working is fundamentally changed. Big floods, big fire, extreme weather. The amount of reported global disasters has increased remarkably. And we need that buffering capacity that intact landscapes can happen. And in fragmented landscapes, you lose that. So you have to reconnect them to get that resilience back. And that's what Australia is doing right now. So this all gets to, how do you minimize environmental stressors? I mean, connectivity is, trying to build the climate resilience that's out there based on the fact that as we undermine the ecology of the planet, we are undermining the services that it provides. And this is just a list of some of the things I've talked about in this talk, summarizing some of those points. I know this is an Africa talk, but this comes to the point where in the Eastern United States, we have the Appalachian Trail, which is one of the, it's an iconic 100-year-old trail. And for the second 100 years of the trail, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy came to me and said, we want a new vision, the second 100-year vision for the Appalachian Trail. And we're going to create a climate corridor. So it's not, again, about moving wildlife. We're trying to protect the landscape that is the basis for the trail, because we want to keep the Smokies smoky, and we want to maintain the watershed that serves 120 million people. And that's what's going to happen in every part of the world. So 30 by 30 is the conversation as the big conservation topic. And if we increase the amount of blobs there are on this blue ocean, and that's what we're doing, we want to increase the amount of protected areas, we're not going to solve the biodiversity crisis. We're not going to solve the climate impact crisis. We have a measles problem. We're not dealing with connectivity. That's why we're pushing very hard to have more connection. Protected areas of the world, only 10% are connected structurally. We'd like to see this doubled in the next 8 years. We've created a metric for how you might do this. And simply the metric is that 30 by 30 is, we want more, here's the blobs we have. We want more blobs of protection, but we want to measure the connections between them. How many are connected? What kind of connections? This is what we want to measure. We want to measure ecological networks, and that those ecological networks will not only double, but they'll also be connected to more high value biologically biodiversity landscapes and seascapes. All of this will happen in the context of a landscape. So while I've given you a network, landscapes are really the operational or operable unit of conservation. It's where species, people, and place interact. So when we talk about One Health and planetary health, I think landscape is the petri dish, or the unit of measure for how this plays out in an ecological way. We want to be nature positive. So this is the conversation right now, is that whatever we do with humanity in the health arena, it has to be nature positive. It has to be better off for the future generations. Now, I've worked in my life in the Albertine Rift, in Yellowstone to Yukon, and recently with the Great Eastern Ranges. And that's what my organization does. We provide support to all these emerging large landscape efforts around the world. There are thousands of them now. And this is just 150 of them mapped, of the 450 we work with in the United States. That's how fast this is growing. And this is so under the radar of so many groups, because they're not paying attention, because they're bottom-up collaborative type of projects that are multi-institutional, multi-jurisdictional, trying to solve big issues with low resources. And the only way they can do it is through collaboration and networking. So for me and my work, saving the planet, saving the health of the planet by connecting these one large landscapes and seascapes at a time. And I'll take any questions, and I hope that made sense.
Yes, it made great sense. And from my side, that was an amazing presentation that connects the dots, and I think is a very timely message for a day like today, the One Health celebration, and talking about planetary health and the upcoming COP. And then I think next month in December, the meeting of the biodiversity COP, which I believe might be in Canada. So I want to propose, since Gary began the talk, we've had several new people join. So you are all welcome, Nikita and Joshua. And also from Cameroon, we have Francoise. And I believe, yes, Zimbabwe, Yokai. So if everyone is okay with this suggestion, we had invited Francoise and Yokai to speak about their experience some, which I believe will be a little bit of a counterpoint with being a little bit more on the human health side. So the goal will be that at the end, we kind of see how we can complement each other and what it looks like moving forward. So any preference, Francois or Yokai, who would like to go first? I'll leave that open, and if no preference, maybe we could go alphabetically and start with Francois. And I see Yokai. Yes, please come in.
Sorry, my background is very. Let me allow her go first.
Sorry, thank you, Francis. Hi, everyone. So I wanted to go first because I'm traveling and I'm gonna be leaving where I have Wi-Fi, so I could just go ahead and start. Thank
Did I freeze or did other people freeze?
Francois' microphone's off. Maybe unmute your microphone, Francois.
I think it was Yokai who was going to go, but I stopped hearing her. Yokai, I don't know if you can still hear us, but we heard you just briefly and now it's gone quiet. And I think Yokai dropped off. So maybe Francois, if you can hear us, if you can come in.
Is
And
she
now
back?
yeah, I see Yokai, you're back. Are you able to hear us?
you. Can people hear me?
I think so now, yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I don't know where I was before I lost you. So I was saying I did like my master's in global health at the University of Global Health Equity, and I did a One Health trip. And in my experience with One Health as a framework and the concept that as healthcare professionals we need to be aware of and be able to understand the interconnectedness of our environment, that is the animals that we live with, and the ecosystems that we are within, and how that impacts our health as humans. So just to comment on the previous presentation, it's basically the professional education that I got, like what the presentation was showing us, it's what I got to learn at school. But my personal experience after school and having to get back home and to try and bring about the social and the cultural lenses to the concept and the framework itself, it is a bit difficult and different depending on the context you are in. Take for example, where I come from in Zim, we have a lot of social, economic, and political issues that are happening in the country. But we do have working groups within the country that are trying to advocate for One Health and trying to have that be implemented within the policies. We have like the climate change and health working groups, but these are mainly like professional people professional people who have learned about it or who have been exposed to the concept, but getting onto the ground and to the people within the communities, they have like other issues that they are really focused on. Not that they don't understand the importance of some of the practices that we are for, like waste management, use of recyclables and everything. They do have an appreciation of that, but on the ground, it's not something that is like really important for them to focus on at the moment, despite what everybody is learning about climate and how the climate change is impacting disease epidemiology and everything. So that's my experience. Like within the communities and people back home, like when I get back home and then I'm dealing with like lay people and everything like that, that's the challenge that's there. Like they still need for people to advocate and to teach about the importance of One Health. And there's also need to be an appreciation of contextual issues or challenges within the communities that you're gonna be working with, or you want to teach all those things. You also need to understand what's the most what's like their main struggle, what are the people really fighting for, and you also need to kind of understand that backgrounds for there to be like collaboration or collective working within the communities. And then so I also had a chance to do UC Davis One Health in the US and California, and I got to experience like a different ecosystem, which is unique in its own way because of the geographical location. Like there's marine ecosystem, and I mean the geography in the US is different. But also, like when I was interacting with One Health professionals within like the global north, I felt there was more like a focus on preparedness, trying to foresee, what are the challenges that may come about due to environmental changes that are happening around, and trying to figure out like preventative measures well over time. And if I compare that with where I come from and the experiences, we have differences in terms of like availability of resources and even availability of expertise in the different areas, and learning about the different ecosystems and how we can kind of like conscientize people and, be prepared for whatever health challenges that people may face. So
Yukai, can I interrupt a little bit? I'm sorry.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I wanted to be sure that Gary, you're able to understand, because I'm not. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
No worries, it's fine. I don't know, like my background noise. I don't know. Do I have to speak louder?
Yes, try to speak louder if it will help.
Okay. Thank you. So I was saying, like, based on my experience, like from the One Health in the Global South and my experience with One Health in the Global North, in terms of like opportunities, I feel like there's, I was just highlighting like the differences in availability of resources or expertise in the different contexts, and also the different agendas in place. Like in the Global South, people do have like traditional ways of preserving the environment and the ecosystem that have been there like for the longest time. It's just the concept of it like as a One Health concept. That's what people may not know, but the practices are already there. And then but then there's the challenge of like resources and expertise to create these opportunities for collaboration across the different sectors, and I would say like mainly resources and expertise and opportunities for future for One Health professionals, whether in the global north or global south, if people are to come together, is to always try and understand like the contextual issues within whatever setting that you are, what are the main challenges that people pay attention to, and try to connect the framework and how it's going to support the people on the ground as well. Yeah, I'm so sorry if people couldn't hear me well. I'm able heard what I was talking, but thank you.
Thank you, Yukai. And what I'd like to do right now is to see if Gary, you'd like to come in and give some feedback to Yukai.
I was Yukai, thank you very much. And I think I caught much of what you said. I think that one of the challenges of moving One Health forward is that the difference between project, program, and policy. I think One Health has been stuck kind of in a project basis, so it's project by project, and there's no programmatic approach in nations, and hence then we move to policies that are not very they're aspirational, but they're not directive, in the sense that you can take it or leave it. It feels good to have One Health policy, but it doesn't mean that people really change the way they do business. So I think, it's part of the challenge of advancing this kind of transdisciplinary approach forward. And I think that capacity is a rate limiter here, and how we get that capacity. My presentation was all about, while it was more ecological, it was all about how do you mobilize people at scale at the bottom, at the ground level, because there isn't going to be any government to really foster this kind of work. And if we can do that for One Health, then I think, we're going to make the change that we seek.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gary, for that feedback, which I totally agree with. So one of the, maybe, do we have any other questions for Gary or feedback?
I'd like to ask a quick question, maybe a hard question, but Gary, how do you involve more of the human medical professionals and their organizations with the ground up, grassroots, indigenous and other well-established people who care about the landscape and the agriculture or the wildlife? How do you get them knit together to where they're working collectively toward shared outcomes that include ecological rehabilitation, as well as cleaner agriculture and better public health infrastructure?
Well, in my experience, it's been, the enlightened individual. That's basically because the medical and veterinary structures are very rigid, and the rigidity kind of weeds out people's ability to think in new ways to address the problem. And there's not a lot of incentives or support. So it really comes down to the individual risk taker who sees this as a challenge to be solved or addressed, and goes forward. I don't see it in a systemic way. I know a lot of institutions, medical schools and veterinary schools are trying to address this. And maybe this is just the diffusion theory in action. There's always early adopters, and then, the early adopters become mainstream, and then there's some kind of tipping point. That's my perception of it. Val, you've been working on this for a long time. What do you think?
I think we need to begin at the high school level at least and present these problems and these solutions to young people, they know what needs to happen, and they need to be validated and not told they have to narrow down and disregard everything other than their specialty. And then we carry that forward into undergraduate education and professional education, to where business people and agricultural people and ecological people and health people and others, political people, they share in being handed problems to work together with real geographies, to where options and outcomes are discussed and enacted. And then when they get to the workforce, they need to be encouraged and handed these out of control or partly controlled problems to work on that fall on the edge of or beyond their disciplinary expertise, and paid as a part of their salary to help address them, not just the usual reward structure of the medical professional, or the veterinary professional, or the ecological or the wildlife management person. And so if we start at the high school level or middle school level and we carry it through to the first jobs, I think we'll have a more likelihood of getting past our disciplinary silos and actually making a difference, bringing more people along with us.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that this kind of group that Nathan has brought together, these kind of, I don't want to call them ad hoc, but these kind of collaborative groups are a way that you can be an adopter after you get to high school. So, for after service education, if you will. So, thank you, Nathan, for pulling this group together.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nate.
Thank you so much, everyone, Yukai, Val, Gary, for the feedback that you've given. And I just want to touch just a little bit onto the discussion that Val brought up on even looking at the discussions that we had here at this conference, and just how much One Health, planetary health featured, and even just one-on-one interactions, people wondering what's the difference between, what's actually the difference between One Health and planetary health. And some of the presenters saying, I'm actually very immersed in planetary health, but I'm also involved in One Health. So like Gary, you said, it's really sometimes just I don't know, it's just those structural differences, the silos that are so hard to break out of. And I also very much agree with what Val said, that it is when we start from an early age, and that's for me where I come in so much, is trying to see how we can talk about these issues from as early as a child is born almost.
Somehow you went on mute.
I have said it's important to educate from infancy through death. And if you look at what happened with regard to the climate movement, Greta Thunberg, if you look at what happened with some of the violent issues in schools in the United States, you see that young people have a voice. If you see what's happening in Iraq, young people have a voice. They're powerful, and elderly people tend to be the highest voting bloc. Everybody has responsibilities and opportunities here to make changes, and the political winds have blown, and they change over time. We had a dominant environmental theme here in the United States in the 70s and late 60s. and it's more fragmented now. We have to have enlightened self-interest and unselfishness come back into the political landscape to help set the stage for this, and to reward political leaders who see the opportunity to work at the landscape level into the societal level to have positive future. And I think if we can get to where we have a theme of gains, ecological recovery, fewer emerging infectious diseases of zoonotic origin, less in the way of a contaminated landscape, and less in the way of climate change. If we can get to where we have that hope, and it's a dominant theme, it becomes easier to perpetuate politically.
So there's a lot that we can talk about with the presentation that Gary gave, just because it's so rich and there's so much. And so I'm hopeful that moving forward, we can have more discussions, even surrounding some of that, just the individual things, like, you know, when it comes to especially, let's talk about Africa, the African communities, for example. How do we actually break through those barriers, you know, have those conversations with our policymakers, our decision makers, and then trickle it down to the community level. Those are some really important conversations. But for now, because of time, I would like to just make a shift and have Francoise, invite Francoise to come in just really briefly, who is based at the local level, to just share a little bit about some of the work that she's doing related to our discussion today. Hi, Francoise. We cannot hear you. At least I cannot hear you. Please see your connectivity, please. Check your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Here in Cameroon is quite evening, and I'm excited to be part of this program today. And I just want to go ahead and say a little bit about what we are doing as concerned One Health and planetary health in Cameroon. I'm a university lecturer part-time. I also manage a civil society organization, which is community-based. And last year, the FCDO, through the Tackling Deadly Diseases in Africa, called some civil society organizations to work with them in the space of One Health. But before then, I think today we celebrated the 4th anniversary of One Health in Cameroon. And it's been existing, but really not structured. And it was just last year that the FCDO gave some funding to get it structured, and they called some civil society organizations. There was a mapping to select some civil society organizations that can be included so that the voice can be heard. Because when I say, there you say, how can the community be heard? It is really through civil society organizations that can reach the community and the last mile health services. And so we got structured, and there were about 16 civil society organizations that were selected, and 2 members from each organization. We were trained, and we had several coordination services that they helped. And at the end, they chose 3 to implement some One Health activities in the country. And there were 2 French organizations. Cameroon is a bilingual country, both French and English. There were both 2 from the French-speaking region and 1 organization from the English-speaking region. And my organization was selected amongst the 3 that were supposed to implement some work on the One Health. And the 4 main areas they insisted we work on was on food security, antimicrobial resistance, rabies, and COVID. So those are the areas they assisted us to implement work in. And we started in November 2021 and it ended in September. They are no longer with us, they've left us, and it's quite challenging. But I came in touch with Nathan and Nightingale and Mona, and we've really been thinking about really carrying work in Africa in the way that the voices can be heard. I tell you that most of the time when I go around the hospitals, when I talk to some physicians, when I talk to some healthcare workers about One Health, they are lost. They don't really know what One Health is. And it means they don't function in the space of the holistic care of One Health. And so talk less about planetary health. And so we've been thinking, when I heard Val ask this real question or answer this question by saying students in the secondary schools should be taught about One Health. I just remember my talk with Mona and a lot with Nightingale. We've really been thinking of how to take it to schools, how to design curriculum that will carry this to schools around here in Africa, because here there are some schools that talk about One Health, but they just talk about it as if it's one of the courses in the exam to the lecturers is coming to give, and then we take it and write exam, but it's not really in the system of the people. And then if we go from the community, like we are saying, there are a lot of policy. When we started doing global health security and food security, we realized that the country has designed a lot of policy that's not been implemented. And I came to know much about this policy recently because I was looking at a grant in GIZ, and I was interested in writing some things about food security in the marketplaces. And I realized there are many things that have been written, but it's not being implemented because people are going against those things and nobody says anything about it. And so sometimes it's when you start the work and then you see the challenge. This year, the team was talking about partnership, public-private partnership. And when I heard Gary saying, there are some people that are doing some robust work, but they need a kind of networking and collaboration for that work to really be visible. Yes, we really need such a collaboration and partnership, Global South, and for the work we are doing on ground to be seen. If you see, if you just take one aspect about agriculture, smart agriculture, climate smart agriculture, food security, food processing, if you see what is happening in our local community, we are really strong not to be sick daily. So and then the message really, really needs to go from the grassroots. And it is, well, in the hospital, so it is a kind of multidisciplinary team. But at the level of this community, is really civil society organizations that are community-based that can really take these messages very far. But where are they? There is these resources to bring them together, impact them such a knowledge, get to the classroom, impact the children with such a knowledge, get to the university, get to some working places. There are some people that work in the space of agriculture, that work in the space of livestock, ecosystem, that have not really even embraced One Health. They just see their normal livestock work and agricultural work as they've been doing, but they're not really embracing it in the One Health space, even some veterinarian. So there's really a lot of work to do, and we really appreciate if you can help put us together that we take this work much further. Thank you. I don't know if I've taken a lot of time, but I still have some things to say. I don't know whether I have some time again or I can stop there. Thank you.
Nightingale or Nathan, can I respond to Francois real quickly?
Yes, please go ahead.
So Francois, first of all, I love Cameroon. I've worked in Bamenda on the Cross River area. You have such a beautiful country. I want to say that one of the things that, I think is an opportunity ahead with One Health in Africa. I got to advise the Mars company with their restoration work in their Cocoa region. Cocoa is a really sad story. It's Ivory Coast and Ghana, and the conditions for growing are very narrow, and climate change is pushing cocoa production further east into in Cote d'Ivoire. And when I looked at the Mars model and supply chains, I realized that there is no site fidelity. So they don't focus on a landscape. If their investments had fidelity, site fidelity, then they would invest in those communities. They'd invest in the health of those communities. They'd invest in the environment. They'd invest in the food security of those communities, but they don't. And when everyone talks about these supply chain issues, what happens, it's like the supply chains move with the good farmers. So this guy over here is doing good work now, but it may not be in 5 years. He may have some family situation go up, and then they'll move to another farmer. And so their commitment to the farmers is not as great as you think. And so there's, I believe, an opportunity within these corporate goals that are set that are really good on paper, but how they're implemented can have a real One Health outcome. And I just think there's an opportunity there, maybe in the various countries where you guys are working, to see that kind of action.
Thank you. Let me just say something. Really, cocoa farmers really suffer in the different community, and their health and the environment is really not looked into. And today it is even worse because they receive a lot of pesticides that are very dangerous to their health, things that have really been banned in some countries. They come and throw it in our countries, and they've made these cocoa farmers to feel that their cocoa cannot grow with such pesticide, which is not only detrimental to them, it's detrimental to the environment and the earth space we are struggling to protect, and even the crops we are growing. I tell you, we really suffer when we go to the market fighting to know which is the good food you can buy and put on your table, because everything is being grown with pesticide. They've taught the population that without pesticide, you cannot grow good food. Many people don't go for organic farming. Everybody just want the crops, and then even the quality of food is changing. We are sick, we keep going to the hospital because of what we eat. Sometimes even if you want to eat it better, you don't know what the farmer is bringing to you in the market. It is really is difficult. And all those cocoa farmers, when they spray those things, they even have the problem themselves, and even the community, they don't even know which distance, what is good for them to you. It is really, we are really sick in Africa with all this One Health issue. We don't know if it is just paper writing, or really they really want to bring some help to some community. We can take a pilot in a community and see how that community can really do well in One Health space with a climate smart agriculture, with organic farming, and then we spread it to other places. But we have not really seen people being engaged the way they should engage in helping these communities. Thank you.
I'll just add to that indiscriminate use of pesticides, of course, causes risk to humans, as well as pollinators, as well as predatory insects, as well as birds that depend upon insects in their food, as well as bats that are insectivores. And the first order of business is to determine whether there's even any value in the pesticide, or whether the crop producer is being sold a bill of goods. And you can get to where you apply a pesticide and then you kill the predatory insects, maybe you thin out the birds. So you wind up with a pesticide addiction outcome, because the predatory insects are no longer there waiting to knock down the pest, and neither are the amphibians that eat insects, neither are the birds that eat insects. It's a slippery slope, and it takes time to come back. So having an analytical capability, having an extension capability to the cocoa farmers as to whether they even need pesticides in the first place, and if so, whether they can select those that are least harmful to the predatory insects, least harmful to the birds, shortest acting in the environment, so they don't have a persistent effect, so they don't go up the food chain. Getting past some of the banned products that are no longer used in Europe or the United States or other developed countries to more modern products that are used only when absolutely necessary is part of the way forward to protect the enterprise of cocoa farming and other agricultural enterprises, and to protect the ecosystem and to protect human health.
Thank you so much for that feedback, that great discussion. I will start off by doing a quick time check because we had proposed 90 minutes and we are a little past that time. I know we did have some challenges along the way, but technological, but I think we did very well overall. So with that time check, just wanting to see if we could, how we're feeling, if we can go a few more minutes just so that we can finalize. Would that be okay, Gary and Val, or do you need to run? Okay, thank you. So I do want to see if anybody else wants to come in, but before I do that, I want to mention that I know we have an educator who is a elementary school teacher who's in the audience, who's been working with us, working with the children at the elementary level. He's part of a group that's also educating high school students to see how those children can, from an early age, be involved in these discussions, these thoughts. And so I think that that's very important. And then to just touch on to what, Gary, you said when you started this conversation today, that you are not aligning with anyone, like you're not aligning with One Health or Planetary Health, but the whole goal is how can we improve our situation from where it is? How can we do better? How can we mitigate in a lot of ways, and in some other ways adapt? And so, and that's a thing that has really been going on through my mind, that with these concepts, especially looking at the Global South and agreeing that all these very awesome concepts are coming from Global North, is there a way that we can still in the Global South really use these concepts, but not in that broken way or divided way of, all right, I'm walking through planetary health, because sometimes I think the pool of resources becomes an issue, and then we promote one cause because that's where we're getting the resources, but not necessarily because we're doing the work that needs to be done in order to make progress. And so if we have a moment later, would like to hear your take on how can we have this be more of a collaborative, and also, okay, thank you. Believing in the power of practitioners. Thank you. Yeah, so we could discuss this more. My other thing would be looking to have a conversation. We have a good amount of human health practitioners on this platform today. And so a continued conversation about this would be great, and even suggestions about mentorship on the way forward. If you guys would have any, would also be very welcome. But I'll stop there to see if somebody else would like to come in. I know Dr. Mona, you've been doing this work a lot and educating medical school students. So if you want to come in briefly, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Nightingale, for this opportunity, and pardon for the technical issues I faced previously. Actually, I just want to say that from my capacity as a professor at Cairo University Medical School, and at the same time as director of the Mentoring Research Network at the Africa Community of Planetary Partners for Health and Environment, and I've been working with Nathan Nightingale for more than a year and a half now, I can say that we need to always have this global vision and seeing the big picture and connecting all the dots, and at the same time be very aware that our actions should be with recommendations that are realistic and meaningful at the same time. So actually, having this in mind can have a profound effect on our local and proximal environments and how we can influence our personal health on individual level and at the same time on the community level. So never underestimate small actions. This is very important because when we put this in the context of the Anthropocene and this new geological era with all the decline in the immune health and all the diseases that is really disrupting our consciousness, that we are even seeing like younger disease phenotypes being like childhood obesity and some autoimmune diseases being really witnessed in young generations. This is truly something very disappointing. But then we always have to figure out what is the root causes of anything that is going wrong, whether it is our food systems, our lifestyle behaviors, our socioeconomic disadvantages, or our environmental degradation, and so on. We have a lot to think about, and we have a lot to research, and we cannot do this while working in silos. And so the first step is to employ this multidisciplinary, action-oriented, solution-focused, and future-directed, and also hope-filled conversations. We need always to focus on hopeful solutions and to bridge theory and practice by enabling this kind of empowerment between whether North and South, whether African and non-Africans, whoever can be invited to this conversation. Academics or researchers should be really coming together in this phase. And so I can see that deliverables from frameworks as One Health or Planetary Health or EcoHealth, they all have similar goals. And so they should be really working in collaboration rather than as competitive teams. Because at the end, when we focus on planetary health, for example, it just came in because it found like a gap in previous initiatives that's not really focusing on the fundamental values or the fundamental value system, which had created all these interconnected challenges in the first place. And so I don't want to take a lot of time in this, but it is always like working together and facilitating partnerships and collaborations is the way to integrated ecological solutions, and at the same time to redefine our future and our values in humanity, and at the same time our health and well-being. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mona. And I can't agree more with what you said. I think we've had a great conversation. I want to just take a step back and see what Gary or Val would like to share. Maybe Gary?
Well, I just thought Mona's words were perfect. I think, that it's exactly right. Look, this is emerging space, and don't get caught up on others to define that space for you. I mean, this is if you have a good network, supportive network, you can move this forward, and I encourage you, just get on with the doing, and not with the defining, because it's wasting time.
I'll just say that ecosystems have fuzzy boundaries, and watersheds not so much, but we can look at maps and we can say what's in the way of better health, what's in the way of ecological recovery, what's in the way of sustainability. And then we can say, let's get together and solve that problem. Who's the obstacle, or how can we help that person come on side and get to where they're helping us instead of getting in the way or creating a problem or a high risk situation for the future. So it's about humanity. I think we also need to reach out to religious leaders and get them on side. Ask them if what their doctrine is about and whether it isn't about a better life for people and for the planet, to where they come in and mention it in their sermons, in their services, and in their outreach. So that, again, we get to where we're having success stories, as Gary has, as you have in your own work, to talk about and figure out how we can get there and how we can have more of those going forward, getting to where these problems, many of them are behind us, or at least they're a lot less.
Thank you, Val. And just to come in with what I posted in the chat, there are really exciting opportunities that are emergent in these holistic health framings. And what I want to echo has come up several times is the importance of a community, the importance of relationships, building trust, and really taking advantage of technology as a tool that enables us to break through and eliminate these geographical, political, social, whatever boundaries, so that people like us who are truly passionate about ensuring that there's a livable future for planet Earth, and really making that story about how we can survive and thrive together in harmony with the natural world and in balance with the planet that is our one shared home. That kind of message is really, it's captivating, it's compelling, it's timely, it's urgent. And so it's what so many of our fellow human beings all over the world are eager and need to connect with. So just joining hands, working together, continuing to open up spaces like what was done today. I think that this is what the solution moving forward needs to look like. So want to invite Mongai and Nikita. I don't think we've heard from either of you, but in trying to ensure we're following those true community principles and walking the talk, want to be sure that everyone knows that you're valued here in this space. And we would like to hear any thoughts or ideas, whatever you'd like to share, if you would like to come in, Nikita or Mongai. So don't want to wait too long. I'm not sure if maybe you're busy or the connection could definitely be poor. So want to maybe transition now to looking towards maybe closing our meeting and gathering today with appreciation of all the amazing ideas and inspiration that has taken place. Looks like we also have another teacher who just joined, Mr. Kogi, from Alliance High School in Kenya. I'm not sure if you're able to hear us yet, but we are just closing or moving towards closing. And so want to open it up to anyone who might need to rush away with any thoughts or last contributions as we look to close in the relatively near future.
Can I just say a few words just to actually, I want to thank you all, because I think these exchanges have been extremely fruitful, and there's a lot of wisdom around this table, and I'm just hoping that I can keep in touch and contribute in any way to the discussions going forward. Thank you.
Well, Nathan, I just and Nightingale and Val, I just want to thank you all for having me and giving me time. I'm, in this world of One Health, Planet Health, it's not that I can't do all the public health and the ecology and the veterinary medicine at once. So you can see I'm trying to work on the nature end of the equation, but that doesn't mean that my work, doesn't fit with the other more focused efforts that the medical and the veterinary community provides. So understand that's how I see my work. It's in the context of this, of a team of collaborators.
Yes, and I happen to currently fit most strongly in the health professional or the health community, but I truly see myself as an ecologist, a life form, planetary being. And so to me, that is really just a means to an end, the role that we play professionally in the health community. But I do believe that within ACOPPHE and the recently finished health meeting, just to kind of pivot to what's coming in the next couple of days with the COP in Egypt, and briefly to mention that we're excited to go to Egypt for the first time. Gil and I are meeting Mona tomorrow for the first time. So, an emergent space where we're really building relationships and seeing how we can continue this work moving forward. But on behalf of the health professionals, we're really amazed and inspired by what's being done in the ecological conservation, wildlife, veterinary communities. And really, we need to work together to bust through, break down, and throw them in the trash. These barriers of what has separated us in the past, because that's the deep meaning of One Health, going all the way back to Calvin Wally, and then Virchow, some of the pillars of modern medicine, and then to the traditional ecological knowledge, wisdom that is truly deep within all of us, and that our ancestors used to get us here. That's what these holistic ideas are about. That it's hard to separate us and wrong, so it's time to reunite.
So I think mine is to just say thank you so much to all of us collectively for taking the time out of our very busy schedules, because we care. And so all that this day as a One Health Day did for us is to provide an opportunity for us to share this wisdom as we forge forward with what we all care about. So thank you so much, our guests. Gary, thank you for the presentation, and Francoise and Val Beasley, thank you so much for connecting us with Gary. Marie-Jo, I know you're waiting to travel soon back home, so thank you for taking this time too. So it's to everyone, thank you, and we will continue with these conversations. Bye for now.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So we will close shortly, but if anyone wants to take the mic off or put the video on to wave and say hi or say bye, we'll leave the space open until everyone needs to go. And welcome, Margaret. You're coming in just as we're really happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too. Yeah. Would you want me to say something?
Yes, free. We are just saying bye, but if anyone wants to stay for a minute or two, to say last words or hear Margaret's reading and farewell, we'll keep the space open.
Yeah, I just feel so bad because this is the time I've been able to get in. But maybe did you record something that I could watch or listen to?
Yes, the whole meeting was on YouTube, so we will share the link. And just want to give a brief preview or summary. Gary Tabor was the keynote speaker, and he gave a very powerful, comprehensive, inspiring overview about the developments in conservation work and the need to connect at large scales, different wild areas and even the areas that don't fit the park model. So really want to encourage anyone who wasn't able to watch all of that. There's some really great material that you'll find.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I'm wishing you a good trip. I know you are heading to some places, and I'll be glad to watch on YouTube.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mom.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you all. It was such a good session.
And happy One Health Day to everyone, and looking forward next year to doing more planning about uniting One Health and planetary health, and anyone who feels the passion, the importance to link up health and environments, education, agriculture, all of these areas. And I see Mr. Kogi just came onto the video, so feel free to say hello and share anything that you have.
Yes, I want to say hi to everyone and apologize for coming late. I had a busy day today and I'm waiting for that video. I hope you said the link to the video so that we can watch the deliberations of today. But we are very grateful. At least I'm happy to see you again and to hear you. I have listened a little bit of some snippets of the meeting, but I'm happy. I believe you'll be hooking up soon. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Karibu sana. And just to emphasize one point that came out in the presentation was children and students, and that to solve these problems as grown-ups, we need to link up with the students, start teaching them these powerful, essential, vital concepts as early as possible, and even learning from them because they have such important solutions and such hope for the future that is so much theirs. So together with them, I think that's the pathway moving forward. So feel free, feel welcome, and looking forward to continuing the journey together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now. Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye.